All right, and we're back. So, troubleshooting steps, areas that can go wrong. A little bit of a design flaw here, I think. Well, potentially a design flaw. So, you have a blade in, or your saber's making sounds, right? You plug in the battery and it makes the sound like a kyber crystal is in it. You put a blade in, you hear a blade insertion sound. As soon as you twist the blade, nothing happens, or you get a disconnect sound at that point. Okay, that is normally an electrical problem in this area of the saber. Okay, and so I'm going to take the board out here and everything, and I'll explain to you why. Again, remember, this is the small side, this is where the rectangle is. Okay, so I'm going to gently remove this stuff here. Okay, so areas that can go wrong. The wire that they're using here, this white wire, is the data wire. Okay, that handles basically all the blade communications. Blade communications are one way. Okay, it only sends information to the blade controller. The blade controller never sends anything back. Okay, so the hilt basically doesn't know that the blade controller, that the blade is actually there, because all it does is send information. Okay, there's actually code in the controller of the blade hilt to keep resending information to keep the blade ignited. And if the blade doesn't continue to get that signal, it turns off. Okay. So one of the things that can happen is this angle. Oh, let me zoom in for you. Okay. This angle right here. You see the angle that that cable is having to take to go inside of the connector? That's pretty sharp angle. And I can tell by just looking at it that it's actually slightly pinched already. Okay, now this was a working blade hilt, or the working hilt, so I'm not too worried about it. But you'll see here it is already pinched. Okay, and if it's pinched, you can take this part, you can take this portion apart. It is spring loaded, right? So you do have to be a little careful when you're doing it. But you can take it apart and you can resolder the connections within this connector, within the spring-loaded connector here, right? You can do that, and I have had to do it before on a blade that didn't work. So that is the first troubleshooting step that I would recommend taking a look at if you have that circumstance where essentially you plug in a blade and nothing happens. You get a connect sound, but then you don't get a connect sound. And that's typically because when this device, let me kind of reassemble things here really quick, and I'll show you some of the mechanics, right? Because the whys are important of what's going on here and why it causes that. So one of the things that can happen, come on. There we go. Okay, so we'll put this back in. Okay, so this connector, you're not seeing anything. Okay, this connector, every time you put a blade in it, okay, again, it lines up, it goes in, you press, and you turn, right? Press and turn. Look at what happens to that cable when you press. Okay. Yeah, we just blew the whole thing up. Right? So essentially what's happening is that cable is constantly being smashed against either itself, because the cable runs across the board here, or it is essentially always being bent at a pretty sharp angle. And what can happen is, as with any cable, right? It can become what's called work hardened, right? So you bend something back and forth enough times, and it eventually becomes work hardened and becomes brittle and snaps. And that's what can happen here, okay? If that does happen, you can replace this with another cable. I've had to replace the entire cable before, okay? And I just got some 28 gauge cable and reattached it, and it was fine. It worked from then on, okay? The same can happen with the power. Okay, so that's the first place I would probably start with troubleshooting if you're having that particular symptom of the blade just basically not being recognized at all. Okay, get this back in here. All right. So to reassemble this too, let's go over some reassembly. You'll notice here on this connector, there's a spring-loaded portion of the connector. Let me show you. Okay. Oh, there's a spring-loaded portion of the connector. Okay. What you need to do is you need to get that spring-loaded connector over these two little tabs that are in here. And I'll show you here what that looks like. So the switch slots right back into its little place where it's supposed to go. Right, you see there? There. Okay. See how it kind of slots itself right back in. And then the connector itself, what I do, my method for putting it in there, is I kind of grab that little metal ring on the top with my fingernails and then angle it in, hold it down, drop it in the little area where it's supposed to lock in. Okay, so now it's locked in. Right, so here's the little tab. Here, let me right, so here's the little spring-loaded portion here, and then there's another, the washer that was on the top goes on the top of the little gap. And again, see that orientation? That's wrong. There we go. See, it'll sit in there and it'll fit correctly, and there will be no gaps down here or anything like that when it's properly aligned. Okay. So that data wire is usually the main culprit. Again, because remember, it has to twist when it goes in, right? It goes in, twists, comes out, twists. So it's twisting twice every time you take the blade in or out. And I think it just kind of gets work hardened, and it can cause, some issues there, right? I would avoid trying to remove this ribbon cable from the top if you can, while you're working on yours. If you do need to replace it, it's the same connector that was in the other part, just over here. So note about those ribbon cables. Let me find my spares here. That's not them. There they are. Okay, so the ribbon cables typically come in like a 10-pack like this, even though if you only need one, they're only a couple of dollars, and they are, okay, these are 15 centimeters. I believe these are slightly longer than the ribbon cables that come stock in there, okay? The other thing about these ribbon cables is these are the type of ribbon cable that have the contact pads on the top and one end, and then the other end, the contact pads are on the same side, okay? You can find ribbon cables where you'll have one end on the top and then the other end on the bottom as well. So, but this particular variety of ribbon cable, they both have the connectors on the top. There's a name for that, but I don't remember what it is, and it's probably written here, but it's in Chinese, so I have no idea what it says. But yes, so these are readily available. They're not very expensive. Oh, this is a 5-pack, and there's 5. Maybe I got 6 on accident. Interesting. Anyways, Okay, let me bag these back up here before I lose them. Okay, so I'll be right back, and we'll do a little bit of reassembly.